Howdy, my name is Kurt Nauck, and I want to welcome you to Fort Knox right here in Spring, Texas on a lovely spring day. We are home to Nauck's Vintage Records and our sister company, Texas Ready. I'm going to take you on a little tour of our facility today, but before I do, let me just give you a little bit of background. We started this company, or I did, back in 1984 in a little shop next to Rice University downtown. That was a public shop, unlike this one, and I closed it down in 1989 in order to focus on our record auctions and as a mail order type business without the public component, which is why there are no signs out here. Nobody has any idea what we do inside this building, and that's pretty much the way that we like it. Fort Knox here was actually designed 20 years ago after I had purchased this land to pretty much mimic the flow of an auction cycle. So the way we have things laid out inside pretty much reflects how a record is going to progress through an auction from the time that it enters the building when I get back from a buying trip until it leaves going into one of your record rooms. So let's go that direction and see what we can find out. So when records come here to Fort Knox, they're usually inside this truck, and many of you have seen this truck. In fact, it's probably parked out in front of your houses at one point or another. I've had this for about 25 years. It's got over 400,000 miles on it, and I've driven this thing from one coast to another, picking up just great stuff to present to you guys in our catalogs. So when I get back from a trip, we pull this truck up and we unload it right through this door into our loading dock garage area. So let's go on inside. So records come in here. This is basically our loading dock garage area. We use this to store packing materials and boxes and so forth, or as a staging area for packages either coming in or going out. You'll see here Jackson's 1931 Model A Ford.
He's ready for his next adventure.
He's tootling around Houston in that thing all the time. He uses it a lot, which is why my 39 Buick had to be moved out to make room for his, because I don't drive mine very much at all. Up above here we've got a mezzanine where we store a lot of packing material, primarily styrofoams and boxes and so forth. We go through a lot of that kind of stuff over the course of a year. So when the records come in, we generally bring them through here and into the cleaning room. So follow me in here, Jack. So this is our cleaning room, although it's not being used as a cleaning room right now. I mentioned Texas Ready earlier. Texas Ready is a company that we run here at Fort Knox, which sells seeds to people who want to grow their own food. We have been in this business for about 8 years. It's been a pretty good business, but 2 months ago the lid totally blew off of everything with the whole virus situation. So we were scrambling, Lucinda, my business partner, and I, trying to find seed and the materials necessary to be able to fulfill these orders. And it's been a pretty crazy 2 months, and we're in the process right now of packing up 500 banks. So this is Elise. She's Lucinda's assistant.
Hi there.
Here's Lucinda in here sorting seeds.
Hi, how are you?
Much the way we sort records.
That's right.
Basically, our seeds are sold in U.S. Army ammo boxes, which we call seed banks. This is our smallest size, the piggy bank. That's for 2 people, and they go all the way up to the treasury, which will feed 30 people. We sell heirloom seed, which is a type of seed that if you plant it and then grow that vegetable, you can take the seeds from that vegetable and replant the following year, so you never have to buy your seed again. So the whole idea is basically a turnkey system to enable you to begin feeding your family out of the garden without ever having to go back and buy seed again. And that obviously is something that a lot of people are very interested in these days. Jack, take a shot right down this aisle here. You'll see all of these are piggy bank seed banks here, and then lock boxes, which is our 4-person kit on the left and down further. So this is a couple of hundred banks here, and then we'll do another 300 once these are loaded up and ready to go. So it's totally different from the record deal, but we enjoy doing it, and we are able to help an awful lot of people. I'll just point out these 16-inch radio transcription cabinets are filled with lacquers, And this is the material that Brian has been working his way through for years and still has a lot left to go. So goodies await. Jack, if you didn't already get it, why don't you show them some of the stuff on the walls in here. These are stored display banners and pictures and so forth that I've picked up here and there over the years. This, of course, is Enrico Caruso, Amelita Galli-Curci, and a Victor publicity poster up there. You have any idea who these guys are, Jack?
We've got Tommy Dorsey, Big Spiderbeck, and I'm not sure who the pianist is.
Would that be Hoagie?
I don't think so. Not in that picture.
All right. And Mr. Edison here, you'll see a lot of pictures of him around the building. So not every record that I bring in from the truck needs to be cleaned right away. So some of the stuff will actually go in the front room, which is where we're headed now. So as I said, records that we bring back from a trip that we are not going to clean immediately will go here in this front room. And we did bring in a collection 2 or 3 years ago of about 30,000 records that basically filled this entire area. This is what we have left. All these boxes still, we haven't even seen what's inside of them yet, but over the next year or two we'll get that cleared out. This is kind of a working area, kind of a holding area. These are records that are unsold or some other records that we're working with, vinyl pressings primarily. Obviously we've got our album sets, or most of our album sets, over here on this wall, and they come and go as we sell them off and buy new stuff. Over here we have a transfer station where we digitize records for the Internet Archive. A lot of you guys are familiar with Brewster Kahle's 78 RPM project, which is on the internet, where they are digitizing literally hundreds of thousands of 78s for free listening. You can go on that website and search for and pull up all kinds of stuff. This is a turntable developed by George Blood, which has the 4-tone arms, long transcription arms, so we can actually play 16-inch records on here if we need to. Each tone arm would have a different type of stylus, different size stylus, each fed through its own KAB equalizer, so that we're able to create several sound files with one play, which really expedites the process and enables us to get several transfers to choose from without having to do a lot of experimentation and continuing to replay a record. So it's a brilliant idea that George came up with, and we're very happy to be able to have this to use here at Nauck's Vintage Records. We've got the digital camera mounted here so that we can take a picture of the label and the runout area as soon as we lay it down on the turntable. Of course, no fort is complete if you don't have a manner in which to defend it, and this is the Nauck's Vintage Records cannon. So our artillery stands ready to ward off all those record thieves out there that might try to break into Fort Knox and take our stuff. All right, Jack, is there anything we're missing in this room?
I think we got it.
All right. We have a number of these throughout the premises. These are rolling turntable carts that are fixed up where all we have to do is just plug it into a wall socket, and we can audition records as we are messing with them wherever we happen to be in the building. So that's kind of a handy little thing to have available. Here's a cloisonné art case Brunswick Panatrope. This is an electric machine. It looks acoustic, but there is actually a wooden, believe it or not, wooden cone speaker behind that grill. Very, very early, very primitive, and a very, very rare piece. Atwater Kent radio, of course, Mr. Edison up here in a dealer print. Would have been in a Edison dealer shop back in the teens or 20s. Okay, so we've seen the cleaning room, we've seen the holding room, and now we're going to see where a record goes once it's been cleaned. We're going to head over to the studio, see if Mark's at home. But first, let me just show you a few things up here on this shelf. This is a double partner fan, which I picked up on a trip to Argentina a number of years ago. Down here on the far end is a lollipop oscillator fan, which I got at the same time. These are just some advertising pieces from record stores over the years. Of course, you've got your MGM Lion, posters from Columbia, Sonora, Victor, so forth. Very nice tortoiseshell radio horn speaker there in brand new condition. Mr. Radiotron Man.
This works for Kurt Nauck now, looks like.
Yes, he does. We pressed him into service as soon as he showed up. This is a really nice radio horn. You've got a driver here in the base. Sound comes up through this part and then reflects down from the shade. Kind of an interesting idea. This lollipop fan functions when this paddle moves to one side. It causes the fan to blow in the other direction, moving the paddle back in the other direction. So that's what causes the fan to move back and forth. Kind of a nifty little idea. Well, Jack, I see that the studio in use sign is on, so I
Can only
think
mean one thing.
Mark must be at home. Oh, there he is. This is generally the way it looks when we move into the studio. Lights out, grading lamp on, turntable illuminated.
Welcome, guys. No idea what you want to know. I'm sitting here grading records. When the records are finished with the welcome to Nauck's, they go through the cleaning process, and then eventually they have to be graded, which is when they
So what are you working on?
Let's see here. I'm working on some vocalions right now. I don't know where you got them, but we acquired a stash of vocalions. And the process is pretty simple. Once the records are clean, they can be accurately evaluated in terms of condition. And that's what we're doing now. And you place them under a pretty good grading lamp. It has to be bright. And I don't know if you can see it or not, but a bright light with the correct spectrum of lighting will reveal things like this damaged area about 1 inch around the inner portion of the grooves. And that needs to be noted because we're attempting to give as accurate a representation as possible to the people who bid on our recordings. And so, yeah, it just under the lamp for an accurate grade. The grade goes on the record, and then at that point, somebody can say, I would like a copy of Vocalion 15449, and I can say, well, this copy's in V+ condition. And they say, I know what that is. And they can grade, or they can bid accordingly. And it's just part of trying to be very thorough and do things professionally.
And so when Mark is grading, of course, he's got this turntable available to him so he can play, thank you, Jack, so he can play records as he goes in case he sees a needle dig or something, doesn't know whether or not it'll skip or repeat. And we can play basically anything with a groove on it in this room.
Yeah, that's kind of why the studio is structured the way that it is. Anything that has a groove can pretty much be played in here with, I guess, the exception of the gigantic French discs that are over 20 inches.
There are 20 inches.
We can't play them on this turntable. But everything else with a groove can be played in here, and that includes both disc and cylindrical formats. Obviously, all discs go on here, and anything that is being in the cylindrical format can go up on that toy right there, which is called an archaeophone, and that gadget will play literally any type of cylinder that's been made. And I believe one of your pals makes those, Kurt.
Yeah, Henri Chamoux in Paris makes these. He started selling these back in the late 90s. I met him in Paris at the Yaza conference that year, and he had his prototype out on display, and we spent a lot of time talking about that and formed a relationship. I became his sales distributor over the years, and we probably sold 30 or 40 of those things all over the world. Some of them have gone to collectors. Most of them, of course, have gone to archives because they're very expensive. When that machine was first, when we first started selling it, was $12,000 with a full set of the mandrels. Today, you'd be looking at around $30,000 for the same thing. But really, really a fun machine, and we're very fortunate and happy to have that here in our studio for our use. Mark, tell us about our rack here.
Basically, all of the audio that comes from any of these machines goes through our central audio rack here, and this allows us to do everything from EQ to noise reduction, and those are fairly important when you're doing archival work. And so in addition to getting the best possible sound out of all of our discs and cylinders. It even lets us play some things that normally we wouldn't be able to play, such as vertical discs, Edisons, and anything that has a vertical cut to it. We can play in this machine complements of the Reca-Cut Re-Equalizer 3 there, of which I think we all have one, except maybe Jack, who has the vertical capability built into his turntable because he's fancy. But yeah, it basically allows us to play anything we would need to play for about any reason.
So we sell the Re-Equalizer on our website, 78rpm.com, and I very much recommend, if you don't have a way to properly set EQ easily to play the records in your collection, you will be knocked out by the difference it makes when you're able to use something like that. Because some of your records, you probably notice you don't play them that much because they sound muffled or muddy or something. It's probably an EQ situation. If you can get that solved, then that's going to open up a whole new listening world to you. So, like I said, you can buy those on our website, and it does enable you to play Edison Diamond discs, Pathés, and other vertically recorded records as well. Which normally, in the past, you would have to rewire a cartridge to do that and use two different head shells and stuff, which is a lot less convenient and more of a hassle. So that's just a really nice piece of equipment. If you have to go out and buy one thing for your system, you've got the turntable, the amplifier, the speakers, and so forth, one thing, that would be it right there.
Yeah, that will alter and improve the sound of your 78s more than anything else, even within the range of that price.
Oh, yeah, it is, for what it does, it's a low price and it's a very clean sound. Yeah. Very, very clean piece of audio equipment. You don't hear a lot of crackle and snap and stuff when you're fiddling with it. And then Mark uses various size styli to get the best results when we do digitizing. These are for the Stanton 500 cartridge, which is no longer being made, but that's legacy stuff around here. We've been using those for a long, long time.
Right, and it's just another thing to keep in mind. Your LPs, your 45s, one stylus fits all, but it's not that way with the world of 78s. And this disc here is an instantaneous disc recorded during World War II, and I'll be spending some time later trying to figure out which one of these stylus sizes fits that groove, because it's not standardized.
All right, so let's take a look at this shelf unit right here. As I said, we sell about 10,000 records per catalog, and once we finish an auction, circulated the unsold list to our customer base, let them purchase records that they may be interested in that did not get bids in the catalog, then this is what we're left with. Here we've got, these right here are all the unsolds, and I guess some 12-inch somewhere, maybe. I guess these right here are all unsolds from the last auction, which just closed last month, auction 67, along with those cylinders up there, and a handful of 16-inch records that are somewhere else. And that's it. Out of 10,000 records, that's all that we have left over. And the reason for that is because I am very, very judicious in terms of the things that I'm looking for to put into a catalog. We don't want to put stuff in that's going to waste people's time or my money in processing records that nobody wants to buy. So for every 10 records or so that we go through, I may find one or two that will actually make it into a catalog. And so when I move a bunch of stuff into that front room that is not ready for cleaning, sometimes that's a reason. We need to go through those records, or usually Jack and Mark are doing it, go through those records, cull out all the stuff that we aren't going to be using, and then the good stuff comes in here or into the cleaning room and then in here to be graded. And the other stuff goes out to the garage where people can come and buy very cheaply. That doesn't mean it's bad records, and usually when people spend some time out there in the rejects, they leave very happy because they get a lot of stuff for a very low price and are very happy with it. So if you're ever in town and want to go through the rejects or see the unsolds, you're certainly welcome to do that. So once a record has been graded here in the studio, then it goes into the back room where we store our inventory, into the collection archival area. And it sits there on the shelf until the time comes that we're ready to put together the next list. At that point, I will start pulling those records out. We will sort through them, we will put them in proper order, and then they will be computerized, generally in here or at Jack's workstation in our office. Once those records are computerized, then they'll go back on the shelf waiting to be lotted. I'll work up a catalog. Once I have it all formatted and ready to go to the printer, then I'll generate a proof set for Jack, and he will take those pages, come into this, which is our auction room. Would you turn the light off in here for Mark?
Too much light.
There
for
you go,
Mark.
Mark.
Okay.
We'll bring those records in here, which is our auction room, and he will sit down with the proof set of pages, and he will go through our inventory sections and pull out the things that I've selected for the auction and lot them. Of course, if you're a regular bidder, you understand exactly what that means. He'll write the lot number on the upper right part of the Disc-A-File sleeve and file them in this room. This room is designed to hold right at about 10,000 records. So our 10-inch records go on these shelves right here, and these over here, ending with our diamond discs somewhere in this area. These are our 12-inch shelves. This is where we put our album sets. Over here, we have our cylinder shelves. So all the cylinders go into these, which are kind of slanted so that they'll slide down as we pull from them. And then we've got our oversized 14 and 16-inch records down here on the bottom. And then paper goods like magazines and books and catalogs and stuff we usually put around the top of the shelves. So we have this room fully packed during the auction process. But once we finished packing out an auction, as we just recently did a couple of days ago, this room is now empty again. So we will use this room as another workspace to sort records, or in this case, we have a big shipment of seeds arriving from the West Coast, and Lucinda has put tags on these shelves of various varieties of seed that go into our seed banks, and she'll bring that stuff in here to sort by variety. And then she'll put them in these jars for safekeeping and so forth. So this is kind of a multi-use room, but during an auction, it is very focused and dedicated on what we're doing. When we close that auction, I will generate a pull list. So that is a large stack of papers which shows the customer ID for each winner in the auction. So Lucinda will generally be the one who pulls the auction winnings for individuals, and she'll take that list and she'll pull an order. And then Mark is usually sitting over here at this desk, and he will take the order from her, check it against his own printout of the list to make sure that she hasn't made any mistakes in pulling, and then he will bundle them in these cardboards, mark it up, and send it out for the packing crew. So that's kind of the way that works. We'll go out to the packing area and talk a moment there, but just briefly, a couple of things in here that may be of interest to you. There's a Bettini stock certificate. Here is a very nice Edison Amberol milk glass dealer sign. There's a double Monk's cleaning machine, which actually we don't use. Again, we clean probably 35,000 sides per year at least, and that would take forever. So we don't really use that, but it's available for our use if we really want to give something a very thorough cleaning for transfers or something like that. So as those records come out of this room into the packing room, they are put here on these shelves. And Jack will station himself right here. And we will have another packing station set up here with shelves that also have the same sort of materials. Your pre-cut styrofoam pieces, your cardboards, paper, knives, whatever it is, labels that are required to properly pack boxes. Packing a box of records is no big deal if you're an LP dealer. But if you're dealing what we deal in, it gets to be pretty hairy at times. When a guy's bought a few 16-inch records and he's got some wax cylinders and some books and a whole pile of 10-inch stuff and one 12-inch record and all of that goes into the process to determine how that box is packed. And Jack is a beast at this table. Usually we will pack the entire auction within a 3-week period. This time, because of the virus situation and we were short one person on the packing table, Jack pretty much packed 95% of this record auction by himself. And you did it, what, in about 4 weeks?
Yep, something like that.
So it went very quickly, given the fact that we only had the one guy here, and we've already shipped out most of those boxes. And there will be over 1,000 boxes that are packed in any given catalog. Jack, why don't you point your camera upwards? We've got a bunch of very nice phonograph horns hanging in here, some of which are very rare and desirable, others which are no big deal. But these are sold individually at times, or sometimes I've just got them on availability in case I should pick up a machine that needs one. This painting here of Nipper and the gramophone came out of the Midwest Phonograph Museum in Martinsville, Indiana. Not too far from where Jack went to school in Bloomington.
Yeah, pass through it all the time on my way trips home.
But unfortunately, it was closed down by the time you knew anything about it.
Yeah, I would pass by the exact spot. I could see it from the road on I-37. Yeah.
Well, for those of you fortunate enough to have actually had an opportunity to go through that place, that was absolutely amazing. Certainly the finest, if not one of the finest, phonograph collections in the world. And I was blessed to be able to buy the record collection when Katie sold that museum. And there was just amazing stuff. On the walls you see some advertising pieces, dealer signs and so forth, all of which are original. There is the sign that used to sit out in front of my antique store in downtown Houston when we called it Memory Machines. That's pretty old. Maybe not as old as some of this stuff, but
Not as old as me. Well,
yeah, probably is. This is our peanut dispenser, which we feed peanuts in from a little bin over here. Peanuts and bubble wrap are kept over the kitchen area. Okay, so that basically covers the working areas of our shop. Now we're going to go back into the collection areas in the archive to let you see some of the treasures that we have here at Fort Knox. All right, we're going to start with the library. This is probably the room in the building that gets the least use, because this is really not a workspace. This is strictly a research tool. We do sometimes have boxes or something in here where we just need a place to put things or store things or sort things, but usually it's just the way you see it. I wish that I could say that this was all in order, all cataloged, all in the computer, and we could just go to anything whenever we needed it. Unfortunately, because this is not stuff that's for sale, it is at the bottom of our priority list. We've got so much to do in running and conducting and packing auctions that we don't have a lot of time to spend on our own stuff. But we do hit it from time to time, and we've made a lot of progress over the years. Obviously, we've got a lot of discographies, labeled discographies, genre discographies, artist discographies, nationality discographies, you name it. Many of these discographies actually come from outside the United States and are very, very hard to find. We also have books, of course, on performers and musicians and composers, inventors, anybody who might have had some kind of an association with recorded sound. And then recorded sound history itself, basically from Leon Scott's phonograph on down the line. So we have a lot of books here about the history of the phonograph. We have books here about various record label companies. We have books on the history and development of radio, as well as radio listings of transcription libraries and so forth. We've got books having to do with the development of motion pictures and recorded sound as it pertained to the cinema. And that's what some of this stuff is. Then we have original record catalogs and supplements from all over the world, going way back. And then we also have some bound sets of various things. Like here we have Talking Machine World. We've got Voice of the Victors that are bound. We've got Melody Maker, which is kind of an English publication from the 1920s and 30s that was more pop and dance band oriented. We have the Gramophone magazine, which most of you are familiar with, long-running publication. from Volume 1 all the way to the end of the 78 RPM era. We've got other publications that are bound across the top here, and then of course the Grosses Singer Lexicon from Germany, Grove's Encyclopedias, and so forth. Here we have the newly published Reiner Lott's German record label set, 5 volumes, very, very nice, and all kinds of other things. So these file cabinets, these also came out of the Midwest Phonograph Collection, by the way, are filled with journals and publications from all over the world, from various societies, archives, and so forth. This is the City of London Phonograph and Gramophone Society publications. They celebrated their 100th anniversary just last year. Here is the British Institute of Recorded Sound, Vitaphone News, Living Blues, Talking Machine Reviews, Sounds Vintage, Record Research, but just all kinds of stuff in here. Your downbeats and metronomes, your IAJRC journals, all kinds of stuff. A lot of this we actually do have in the computer, but not in a detailed fashion necessarily that we can search things, but at least we know what's in the drawers. And then we also have microfilm and microfiche copies of publications as well that we've received from various places. So that kind of covers the research part of this room. Let's look at some of the artifacts that we have. You've noticed the cutout figures around the top. These are all Victor talking machine recording artists from the late 1920s, some of whom you'll recognize. Obviously, this is Will Rogers. Here's Frank Crummett, Gallagher and Sheen. We've got the 8 Victor recording artists here in the back that made that 12-inch Batwing Victor some of you are probably familiar with. We've got other artists across here, John Philip Sousa, Eileen Stanley. Here are the Duncan sisters, Harry Lauder, Fanny Bryce. Over here we've got we've got Paul Whiteman. Here's Caruso, Gallicurci, Poncel, Farrar, and others. A lot of operatic and classical artists represented in this collection. You will see these cutout figures from time to time in antique stores or at music shows or something. They're not terribly rare, but to find a set of them like this, I've never seen another set. And to be honest with you, I don't even know if this is a complete set. I wouldn't know what a complete set represents, but I wouldn't think it would be many more than what you see in here. So these were used by Victor dealers for their store window displays and stuff to set up with phonographs and that sort of thing. The paintings that you see here on the wall, these two anyway, are very significant. This came from the Midwest Phonograph Museum. This is an original oil painting from the early 1900s of a French cardinal listening to what appears to be a Pathé Gaulois cylinder phonograph. Here we have an old man in his little breakfast nook in Italy, and he is listening to a puck machine, very similar to the one that we have on display here. And the 3 cylinders that Caruso recorded for the Anglo-Italian Commerce Company, right there on his table. And these are not actual Caruso cylinders here, but just a similar little setup that goes with the painting itself. These will be the subject of a future video. So we're really not going to go into that right now, but just suffice it to say that is definitely one of the treasures here at Fort Knox. But some might argue, and might be correct, that the real treasure of Fort Knox is sitting right here. This is not only one of the most interesting and important artifacts in our collection, it is probably also the ugliest, which just, of course, adds to its charm. This is Brian Russ's typewriter. I was fortunate to have the opportunity to visit Brian twice over the years, and the second time I was there was the week before the 2001 ARSC conference, which was a joint conference with YASA, the International Association of Sound Archives. And we were meeting in London that year. I actually flew from the U.S. to England on the very first flight that was allowed back into the air. So it was that near to the whole Twin Towers thing. And I spent a week just driving around the UK visiting dealers and collectors and picking things up before the conference. Anyway, so when I was at Brian's place, people would go to his place, and he had a fabulous collection, as you can imagine. And they'd be going through, and they'd be looking at records, and oh my gosh, if you ever want to sell that, let me know. And oh, look at this. Oh, I can't even believe you got one of those. I mean, the records were great, but Brian, I said, when you no longer need this, I would love to have your typewriter. He says, why would you want that? So, why wouldn't I want that? This is Brian Russ typewriter. For those of you who don't know, he is the grandfather of discography. In fact, here's a book that was published, Brian Russ, Guide to Discography. He is responsible for many of the books that we would be lost without today. I mean, this right here, the 2-volume set of jazz records, is tremendously important. First published decades ago. It's been through many editions and printing since that time. Here's London Musical Shows on Record, British Music Hall on Record, discography of historical records on cylinders and 78s, the complete entertainment discography with Alan Debus. He worked with Tim Brooks to do the Columbia discography. He did the Victor Master book, Volume 2, and much more, much more. Very, very prolific researcher. But the neat thing about the typewriter is that they did not take his information and typeset it to make these books. No, these pages are the actual typed pages that came off of that machine. So, as you know, typewriters have a fingerprint. You can tie a typed page to an individual machine based on the characters. And this is from that machine right there. So you can see why I just regard that as an iconographic. I think that's right. Iconic. Thank you, Jack. Jack fills many different roles here.
You spend too much
at
time
Nauck
around
Records.
phonographs and stuff.
That's it.
That's
an iconic piece of phonographic history right there. So if you ever come to Nauck Vintage Records, certainly you're going to want to come visit the shrine to Mr. Rust. Okay, so that kind of takes care of the research library. Let's move on back to where the records are. This is where we keep all the recordings that have been graded. So you've seen other holding areas for records, but once Mark has graded something, this is where it winds up. People want to know how we've sorted records, how we catalog and file them and so forth. And we basically have several different parameters. First of all, has a record been entered into the computer or has it not? Secondly, is it part of inventory or is it part of the archival collection here? So those are the two main factors in terms of where a record goes in this room. Now those are very fuzzy lines. Obviously your uncomputerized stuff becomes computerized. Stuff that's in the archive may move to inventory or vice versa. So those are blurry, but that's basically our first level of sorting. Then beyond that, what size are the records? Our 10-inch records go one place, our 12-inch records go one place, our cylinders and that sort of thing. So the format and size is the next thing that we look at. And then we look at, does a record get sorted by artist name, like most of your genre categories like jazz, blues, classical, opera, that sort of thing, or is a record sorted by label and catalog number? So that's a very important distinction for us. So that may not tell you a whole lot, but that's the way we do it. It may not work for your collection, but it works very well for us in terms of the catalogs that we put together. So if we look over here on this wall, these are all records that have been graded, but they have not yet been computerized. So we can pull something out like a divider here. We see that this is in the movie promo section, radio exploitation discs, 10 inches. That is category number 3036 in our database. So anything 3036 is going to go right here, and then that will eventually be a section in a future catalog. This is fundraising discs, catalog section 1531. So it looks pretty anal. It looks like we spend a lot of time filing records, And indeed, when you're selling the kind of volume that we sell with the very limited staff that we have, you've got to be organized. When we're trying to find stuff, it is so important. These are all records, as I said, that have not yet been computerized for the most part, but have been graded. This is a wall where we store our oversized discs. These are 16-inch records, and also our smaller discs. Our 7-inch and under recordings are up here. So we have Berliners, we have 16-inch radio transcriptions, we have album sets, we have movie soundtrack discs, and so forth. Around the top here are a lot of vinyl pressings made from original metal parts, which we have computerized, but we have not yet gotten around to doing anything with them. One of these days we will, because there's some really interesting and important stuff in there. A lot of material which is unissued, either unissued takes or unissued matrices. We've got a lot more of them going down this shelf on the top, and other places in the building scattered around as well. Most of this is operatic and classical in nature, but there are some other interesting things, some historical stuff, some personality stuff, some film soundtracks. So I'm looking forward one of these days to finding the time to doing something with that. Up across the top here, we've got record catalogs in those wooden boxes down there. We've got cylinders that have yet to be sorted and computerized. This aisle contains more of what we had over there, except this has all been computerized. So this is ready to be worked up into a catalog, and much of this will indeed appear in Auction 68 in the fall. This side over here is represents recordings that are actually in our personal archive. So this is the Nauck's label collection. This is one of the finest collections, if not the finest collection in the world, having to do with pre-World War II commercially issued American labels. And there are examples in here of which the copy on the shelf is the only copy I know to exist. Whether it was because it was a phantom label and never actually saw production, or whether they're just exceedingly rare. So that's kind of a nice little section. Here are foreign labels, unusual sleeves. We've got historical recordings, speeches, and so forth. Here's Marsh autograph pressings. I like labels like Marsh because they did such interesting and different sorts of things. A lot of personality and one-off and experimental stuff. So those are fun. These are Edison diamond discs, a lot of which were unpublished special pressing things like the transcontinental diamond disc and Morse code messages and things of that nature. I love technology in records. So we've got multi-track or puzzle records in here. We've got, in terms of puzzle records, you've got 2 or more grooves that run adjacent, so you don't know what you're going to listen to when you put the needle down on the edge. In the case of multi-track records, we've got several recordings that are overlaid, which is, of course, what they did primarily beginning with tape, but some of that was also done in the 78 RPM era. So there's all kinds of stuff. There's picture discs, and there's instructional records, and what have you. Lots of really interesting things. Not necessarily valuable, not necessarily rare, but just cool. And then this last aisle has records on this side, which are part of our gem quality collection. So every time we run a catalog, we list records which are gem quality in nature. So these are recordings which are basically brand new or close to it. No record goes on this shelf unless it's at least a very, very clean E-. So we put these all together in their own special section. We have diamond discs across the bottom. This wall, as you can see, are cylinders. We've got brown wax cylinders of various sorts, Concerts, Lamberts, U.S. Everlastings, Indestructibles, Columbias, you name it. Blue Emeralds down here. And we've got a lot to add to this, which we haven't done since we pulled the records for the last catalog, but that will all be something that we'll be working on over the summer. This is a cabinet that I got that originally came from an English dry goods store, and it works perfect for cylinders. And in here are some incredibly rare things, either in terms of the cylinder itself and the content recorded, or just the boxes. There are people who collect cylinder record boxes, and there are some great ones in here. And you'll find things from American blue box Bettini cylinders to Bell Tainter cigar cylinders up here, and just all kinds of really neat things. These cabinets over here are also filled with artifacts of one sort or another. A lot of different cylinders. So here are some European cylinder boxes that are very unusual. That kind of covers the recordings in this room. Let's just hit some of the artifacts. That's a Victor V, a nice oak wooden horn on it. Here is a Edison Triumph phonograph. We should play at least one record in this video. We're not going to play the whole thing because we don't have time. But this is one of my favorite cylinders, Oh Helen. It's a 4-minute cylinder.
When he'd speak, he'd always stammer, and when he tried...
And that's about all the time we have for that, but it's a great record. One of these days we'll play it on the Bitter Request Show. We got a lot of record cabinets around. These are generally cylinder cabinets. Here we have one full of brown wax. Some really interesting things in here. Here's a series of home recordings. Look at this. Homemade record, New Year's Party, 1905, 1906, 1908. Boy, that kind of stuff, especially when you get a whole collection like that, is really unusual and very culturally important. This is a very rare machine. We'll briefly mention this. This is a telegraphone. It's a U.S. machine. This was made around the 1908 to 1912 period. I'm not exactly sure when, but this is made to record on steel discs magnetically, and it was made to record telephone conversations. This is the only example of this type of telegraphone I have seen. I have done a lot of research, a lot of searching. Nobody's seen another one of these. I believe that this is very likely a prototype. I don't have any discs for it. But if you happen to have a sound archive that has some metal discs and you don't know anything about them, maybe they belong on this, and I would love to hear from you. It would be cool to be able to get sound off of that, because if you were, I don't know how they were labeled, if they were labeled at all. If it's just a metal disc, nobody's going to even know that there's something recorded on that thing magnetically. So now all you archivists out there, be aware that something like that may be around, and if you find it, might be worth checking out. Here we have an Edison Maroon Gem, 2 4-minute machine. This is a very interesting fan. This is called a Lake Breeze hot air fan. These were made in the late teens and are powered not by electricity, not by battery, not by wind-up springs or anything, but these were actually powered by a flame. This is an alcohol burner. So you'd fill that with your alcohol, set it alight, and once the piston in here gets heated up enough, you kickstart it with your fingers, and that thing will run until the alcohol runs out. Just a really cool device. It has what's called a Stirling engine, named after the inventor, and those are very rare and desirable to fan collectors. Here is a nice early Zonophone machine, 7-inch record storage cabinet. I got this as well, and this 20-inch Pate Theater soundtrack accompaniment disc on my trip to England just before that Ars Ghiazza conference I was talking about. This is probably the most important phonograph I've ever owned, or ever will own. This came from a lead that Katie Drake, who owned the Midwest Phonograph Museum, gave to me. She said, "Here, this is somebody you need to see if you can track down, because they've got a tinfoil machine." And it took me years to do that, and I finally located it. And this has been sitting in some guy's attic for decades, stored inside this original case which meant that the machine was absolutely pristine. I have not done anything to this. This is perfect original condition. It came with its little recording and playback cones, just brilliant. It was made in Unadilla, New York by the Unadilla Machine Works Company. Has a tag right here on the bottom. Can you see that, Jack? Mm-hmm. Probably made in the early 1880s. So for an undocumented American tinfoil machine, which is surely unique, that is a primo piece right there. It even came with some tinfoil, which may date back to when this thing was made. I have no idea. That could be a project for Irene. So that kind of covers this room. This is a, briefly look at that. That's just a cylinder music box from the 1880s. We do deal in music boxes, though not frequently. So this this particular machine is just kind of an example of what a cylinder music box would be like. Music boxes were basically put out of business by the phonograph, but they also came, like the phonograph, in both disc and cylinder formats. All right. Here in this little area, we've got a Type A zonophone from around 1901. What makes this machine really collectible and desirable is the fact that it has these little bevel glass windows here. So if I wind that up, and you can see the motor spin underneath. See the reproducer going. Can you pick that up? Mm-hmm. So underneath this machine is another machine that's especially nice. This is a Pathé Actuel from roughly around 1920 or so. Pathé, of course, was a French company, but they also made phonographs for the American market. The Actuel machines did not have a horn like all these other machines that we have around here. Instead of having a horn, they bypassed the horn altogether and just took the reproducer and blew it up, and this paper cone is the diaphragm of that reproducer, just as you would have a piece of mica or aluminum in a diaphragm of some other phonograph. You wouldn't think that that would really sound all that great, but we're going to play this, and you're going to see. It's probably not going to sound all that great on the video, but in person, this thing really will knock you out. This is a center start 14-inch Pathé recording, and we're going to play it with the Sapphire stylus. So you can see that packs quite a punch. The here we go. The record storage is down here, not much, but a little bit. And this particular reproducer can be rotated in order to play regular 78 RPM lateral cut records as well. So it plays not only the Pathé vertical discs, but also just normal 78s. So very nice Gothic style case with the carved polychrome panels inset. Just a really attractive machine. A couple things that you'll see here on the walls. These are very early concert posters. You don't see concert posters from this time period very often. Floyd Mills and his Marylanders, Jeanette Recording Orchestra. Here we have the Emperor of the Air, Phil Napoleon, and his Victor Recording Orchestra, featuring his own Memphis 5 of worldwide fame. Record makers for every phonograph company in America. Really nice pieces. And one last thing I want to show you here is something that I don't know anything about, other than what's evident just by looking at it. This is a 16-inch disc, very similar to what you would expect a 16-inch metal part would look like if you were going to press radio transcriptions. But instead of having grooves, it's got signatures all over it that apparently were done with an engraving tool. And if you look at who these people are, here we have the Jesters, Burl Ives, Carmen Caballero, Bing Crosby, Johnny Long, Jimmy Lunsford, Judy Garland, the Mills Brothers, Hildegard. If you're hearing these names, you may be picking up what this is all about. Here's Connie Boswell, Ella Fitzgerald, Louis Untermeyer, the 4 ink spots, Bob Everly, Marlena Dietrich, the Andrews sisters, Patty, Maxine, and Laverne, Guy Lombardo. These are all Decca recording artists. And somewhere on here is a signature of Jack Kapp, who was the founder of the company. So somewhere along the line, they had this thing out, and the artists were asked to sign it. I don't know the circumstances behind that. I don't know when it was done. Don't know anything about it. So if one of you guys who's watching this video can clue us in on that, I would greatly appreciate it. This is my favorite room of the entire building. Not necessarily because of what it has in here, but simply because this is my opportunity to actually kick back and enjoy records. What I got into this business for to begin with is I love the records and the music just as you guys do. And this is where I go to kind of hang out, get some work done, but also spend time just listening to these wonderful artifacts and recordings that we have in the building. This pool table here is actually something you don't often see, because usually we have a top on it, a ping pong top that we also use from time to time, but more often we're sorting records on it. I needed a big sorting table for this building when we constructed this place, and I wanted something that was multi-use, and this is perfect for that purpose. So we sort records in here when we are putting things into order alphabetically for computerizing, or when we're going through and putting together a bit of request show or whatever it might be. So this is a very, very well used area in our building. We've got a rolling turntable over here, which I use quite a bit, and it's all hooked up to speakers over here in the corner, a couple of Klipschorns, so it's a very nice listening environment. So I can sit here, I can play records, I can sort records, I can play pool, whatever it is that I'm doing, and just finally let it all fall off, enjoy, relax, and chill out after a long day of work. In this room, we've got some very interesting things, and we don't have time here to go through all of it and so forth, but I'll mention just a few things. First of all, the things that you see on the wall, these are all pictures of opera singers. They are all autographed and presented in very nice shadow box type of frames, where you've got 2 or 3 different levels of mats with a piece of costume jewelry and the artist's photo and signature. You have things ranging like, for instance, here's Caruso with a 1919 autograph, all the way up to something like this, which would have been done in the 1980s. So there's a wide range of singers represented here. But I found this collection just a couple of months after we completed construction on this building up in Milwaukee. And I purchased this as a lot from a dealer up there, knowing that they would go just perfectly within this particular workspace. Let's look at a couple of the cabinets, Jack. We've got 3 display cabinets in here. We'll start with this one. This is kind of highlighting needles. You've got not just your regular steel needles, but you also have tungsten needles, bamboo needles. Of course, if you have bamboo needles, you're going to need a bamboo needle cutter, which is what this is, or this one up here. We have cactus needles. So here's a cactus needle sharpener. We've got whale ivory needles. All kinds of different needles for playing records, in addition to just the soft, medium, loud tones that most people are familiar with. Then in addition to needles and needle-related implements, we've got these little dancing toys. So the most common is Dancing Rastus down here. He turns up fairly frequently. And then we have the Fighting Cocks, the Boxing Darkies. This is Banjo Billy, which is not an old toy. That's a new creation by a fella in Florida named Charlie Weatherby. I'm not sure if he's still doing those or not. But the rarest of all is the one up here on the top, which is Uncle Sam kicking the Kaiser. And so you would take these little stands that they're on, and that fits down over the spindle of your turntable, your Victrola. And once you get that turntable rolling, it causes these little figures to jiggle up and down and do their thing. So just kind of a fun and amusing sort of a thing. This display cabinet here is filled with things that have to do with, that are more technological in nature, either in terms of recording or reproducing sound. Here we have a metal part that was actually used to produce that Edison diamond disc by Anna Case. She's doing the mad scene from Lucia. We have a 2-minute wax gold molded Edison mold right here, which produced this cylinder, Theodore. And over here we've got a Columbia cylinder mold that produced that 2-minute wax cylinder. So those are very, very rare. Then we also have various reproducers and recorders and stuff. This right here is a little Thorin's camera phone. These were very, very popular in Europe for a good long period of time. You take that to the beach or on a picnic or something. This one is basically unused. It's brand new. Of particular interest is this thing here at the bottom, which is a disc home recording setup from around 1920, believe it or not. It would record on these thick wax blanks, and it's virtually as new. The nickeling and everything is perfect. All the original instructions, the original boxes, labeling, everything. It is so rare to find something of that vintage and that rarity in that kind of condition. So very, very happy to have had an opportunity to pick that up. And then, oh, this is one more thing that should be mentioned. This is a artist sample of what a Victor credenza orthophonic horn would look like as a cutaway. So Victor introduced the orthophonic line in 1925, and it was a revolution in the history of recorded sound. Nothing had ever sounded the way these newly invented electrical recordings with the orthophonic system sounded. So in a credenza, you'd have your tone arm with a reproducer. It goes down into this flange. It comes through this piece, comes out here, which then goes in there, is reflected back, and then reflected back again here. So this is what we would call a folding exponential horn. If you were to stretch a Victor credenza horn out from the diaphragm of the reproducer to the grill cloth, it would be about 6 feet long. So it is a ingenious way of enclosing a very large horn into a relatively small space, and they just sound amazing. The little salesman samples like that are very, very rare and desirable. Certainly much more so, much rarer than the machines themselves. Here's a Zonophone Concert Grand. There is a U.S. Everlasting Opera phonograph, which is unique in that particular configuration with a mahogany case and the tiger stripe bronze. There are only 6 U.S. Everlasting Operas known to exist, but none of them are like this. This was a very high-end, probably special production machine. A very rare and significant phonograph. Plays both 2- and 4-minute cylinders. That's an Edison opera over there in that corner, which plays 4-minute only. You see again some seed banks. This has been a room that I've used quite a bit over the last couple of months. Boxing seed banks. As the ladies get them packed up in the ammo boxes, I come in here, I put them inside the cartons, and we ship them out. So again, we have the little ones over here, which were the piggy banks. We showed you one of those in the cleaning room. And then here to Jack's left is the Treasury. Those are the largest seed banks that we sell, rated for providing for 30 people. So they range in price from $125 to the little ones to $1,000 for the Treasuries. Okay, we did have an Aeolian orchestral player organ here up until about a month ago, and I just moved that out to have it rebuilt by a fellow in South Houston. And when I get it back, that thing is going to sing. And maybe we'll do a video of that one of these days. But that's why we have such a large empty space here and a place for me to work. This cabinet right here has to do with advertising and promo for phonographs and records. All kinds of really, really cool, interesting things in here. We've got the RCA Victor talking ashtray from Canada, which is one of the most bizarre things that you'll ever see. We've got a Sarah Martin OK record duster on the left. We've got printer's blocks with little banks in order to save money for your next phonograph purchase. A little jewelry case with a clock mounted on top. A little inkwell in a Victrola 210 type cabinet. This Brunswick record in back looks pretty normal and ordinary, except that it's metal. So that could be placed into a storefront window without melting in the sun. This record right here looks very ordinary. Francis Craig on Bullet, Red Rose and Near You, but that one's autographed. I've often said that if you're going through a box of records or a collection and you haven't run across at least one copy of this record, then you really haven't started looking at records yet, because those things are everywhere. But it's the only one I found that was autographed by Mr. Craig, so here it has a place of prominence in our display case. Here you see the Victor puzzle. Here is a world record controller, which plays constant velocity records. Not going to get into that, but that's an Australian invention, which is just very, very cool, and one of these days we'll probably do a video on that. Here are some Robert Crumb collector's cards of heroes of the blues, country music, and jazz, which are very nice. A dealer's Pathé Globe with the red rooster. Very, very nice piece. Never seen another one similar to that. And this is a reproduction tinfoil machine made for the 100th anniversary of the phonograph. So that kind of covers this room in terms of the more interesting things. I want to close by just, I don't think we've shown a catalog in this whole tour, but this is what our catalogs look like. This is the one that just closed in April, the one that Jack just finished packing up, filled with records of every imaginable type and variety, format, anything basically recorded from the 1890s, which this record is an example of. This is an 1890 5-inch Berliner, all the way through the 1950s and the end of the 78 RPM era, as well as cylinders, radio transcription, soundtrack discs, and everything else. If you would like to get a copy of this, just drop us an email, go to 78rpm.com. You can reach us from there, and we'll be happy to put you on the list, and you'll continue to get auctions as long as you continue to submit bid sheets. Jack, what else? What are we leaving out here?
Well, there's just about one thing left to not leave out.
Okay. Well, I just want to close by thanking all of you for hanging with us through this video. I hope it's been of interest to you. If you have any questions about anything, let us know. As I tell people who tour through the building, you know, this may look like a museum, but this is actually a business. Much, if not most of the things that you've seen in here are actually for sale. So if you see something that you may be interested in and it hasn't already flown out the door, let us know, and we can get together on that. So as Jack said, we have one last thing that we'd like to show. This is a spectacular piece. It's not really related to recorded sounds specifically. This is a music producer, not a music reproducer. This is what we call a Mills Violano. These were made for roughly a 20-year period between, give or take, 1910 and 1930. This particular machine was made in 1927. Your later Violanos tend to sound a little bit better because they've had years of refinement behind them as they've tweaked things and added things and so forth. This is a player violin and a player piano in the back. The piano harp is mounted on that back door, and it's not doesn't have a keyboard, so you can't actually play it manually, but it has a kind of a shield-shaped harp on it that equalizes the pressure on that door. This plays music rolls like a player piano, but instead of a player piano roll, which is pneumatic, that is, it works off of air pressure. There is no air pressure involved at all with this machine. This is totally electric. So the music rolls that cross over this tracker bar when you have them mounted, the hole enables a wire finger behind this bar to make contact with this metal bar and complete a circuit. And so that's the way the machine operates. It's all electric. And hole A may play one note and hole B may play some other note, but if hole A and B come up together, it may do something entirely different. It may trigger some expression or change the rotation of the little bow wheels or something. So it's a very complicated, very complex device, and regarded by many people as the world's first computer, because these rolls, in essence, are nothing more than the kinds of punch cards that many of us used and learned how to operate computers with back in the 1970s. Those punch cards were just pieces of paper with holes in them and did the same thing that this Violano was doing. So we are going to end our tour by playing the Violano. It's going to take us out. I again want to take this opportunity publicly to thank Jack, our videographer. Did you wave to the... Here.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, here we go. Here's old Jack and his camera.
Hello.
And we've seen Mark, we've seen Lucinda and Elise. Unfortunately, Cookie wasn't here today, or Brian, but I'd be lost without all of those people. There's no way I could do what we do here without their devoted, intelligent help. I mean, you got to really have your act together to be working in here, as you can see. So I'm very thankful to them. I'm thankful to God who allowed me and has blessed me throughout my life in so many different ways to bring us to where we are today. And I give glory and honor to Him. We're going to play one last thing for you. I'm not going to be able to listen to the whole song, but you'll at least get a chance to see how this machine operates.